College basketball is in the full swing of things, and we have 3 to 4, actually more than that, really exciting matchups to talk about, including the Indiana men's basketball team, the Indiana women's basketball team, Iowa making a big run last night against Virginia Tech, and then some other matchups that we will discuss on the show, including some women's basketball scores and some rankings in the Division II and Division III realms, and all of that and more is coming up here on the Cinderella Slippers Podcast as of today, November 10th, 2023.
And they are stunned. Dribble drive kick. 10 seconds to go. Here comes the play. Whitman at the free throw line. Jumper. They are riding a Cinderella wave. 67, 64, 4 seconds left. They'll like the foul, remember. Ivy for the tie. Off the rim, and it's over. This miracle run continues for Steve. You believe it? For just the second time ever, a 16 beats a 1.
Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Cinderella Slippers Podcast. This is Braydyn Bear-Lents. I'm going to be a little bit everywhere today on the day before Veterans Day. Have to give a shout out to all of the veterans in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard, and above and beyond because of their work, of what they've been able to do, not just to protect our freedoms, but also to protect our country as well. To any veteran out there, I give you all a shout out, give you all the biggest round of applause, as long as we continue to keep on fighting for our justice, for our rights. We will continue to probably one day live in a more just nation, one day, hopefully, under non-political divisions. Speaking of that, the Let's Go Braydyn podcast is going to be coming back out next year, and I have decided that we may not actually talk more about politics, but about human interest and human issues instead of talking about that. So keep an eye out for that for the regular Spotify podcast listeners. And if you all are curious why I'm just so far away from the microphone, I'm actually making my family members' beds, my sister and my mother's bed. I know that's kind of embarrassing to talk about, but I'm making their beds because we're going to be heading out of town, as we do every weekend, and we just need someone who's actually going to make the beds, someone who can actually make the beds, and they always rely on me. And this is something I think marriages work out as well, is that many people don't understand it. Sometimes if you have, I don't know, maybe a wife or something, she'd want you to do the job that you're the most good at. So that's exactly what I'm doing while I'm recording this podcast. I've never done this before, but we have a lot to talk about. First and foremost, let's talk about the women's basketball action last night. In what 2 games, it probably would be the games of the year, the Florida State-Tennessee game and the Iowa-Virginia Tech game. Let's start with Iowa and Virginia Tech. Iowa began really running the floor, really penetrating to the basket. Caitlin Clark had a good night for the most part, and it was a game that we all expected. 2 teams that will probably meet again in the Final Four, going at it with 3-point ball after 3-point ball, that buzzer beater in the first quarter to seal the deal. Basically, Virginia Tech almost could have ran it loose at points in the game, and at points they did not. Iowa looked strong, and they will be probably for the rest or the remainder of the year. And Iowa, to me, as I've said all along this season, if they're going to win a national championship, they're going to win it with Caitlin. And Caitlin really put on a show last night. I don't have the stats with me because, again, I'm making the bets because it's the best chore that I can do. But Iowa is really good on the three-point baskets. I even saw that their defense, though, needs a little bit of tweaking. We even saw that last night against Virginia Tech. Gave up some easy shots that could have absolutely maybe not have kept that game close. Because if this was, I don't know, Northwestern, Iowa would be blowing them out by 100. But instead of blowing them out by 100, they're doing just the absolute most to fully get into the defensive side of the ball. But my big thing is the offense is going to be good this year. They were really good last night. But I would say it was the game of the year. One of the candidates, early candidates for game of the year. And I'm not quoting my longtime rival Lucy Rodine about this. But she is right. It was almost a pre-candidate of game of the year. Both teams played well. Both teams were really hard pressing. And not only were they both just substantially good, they were also going to be real competitors going into the NCAA tournament, and that we all saw last night. Florida State, Tennessee, I'm going to be really shocked, and it's shocking to tell you this, but I did not actually watch that game because I think it was later on in the night or even earlier in the day. I don't know. I've had school and finals and stuff like that to do, but from what I could understand, that could also have been a candidate for game of the year. Because if you watch the highlights, they made so many good shots per so many good rounds. Almost felt like a boxing match watching that game yesterday. And Florida State, they're the real deal. Tennessee, they're a real deal. And Tennessee's been a real deal since the Pat Summitt days. But they really, even in a post-Pat Summitt setting, I just think Tennessee, they never disappoint you. They never have disappointed you. They're Tennessee. They're like UConn from years and years and years ago. So it's the day to Breanna Stewart. And I would actually tell you and make even more of an argument that Tennessee could probably make an Elite Eight this year. And if they don't make an Elite Eight, that's fine. Because I just said a lot of college basketball fans would assume that Tennessee could get upset once in a blue moon. But I'm also saying that Tennessee, they looked like a really good ball club out there yesterday. And even Florida State looked like a really good ball club out there yesterday. As a matter of fact, here are some stats. The Rakia Jackson from Tennessee had 17 rebounds, 4 assists, 31 points. Along with Sarah Puckett, who even had a better performance at 15 points, 1 assist, and 4 rebounds. But you have to go back to Rakia Jackson for a minute. That is very impressive. 31 points. She literally could be one of the players of the year. Tania Latson also had 20 points. Amaya Gordon for Florida State had 22, 5 and 2 and 5. It's what I'm saying. Both teams it got close near the end, but both teams, this game could have also gone into overtime. But these two teams were really at it, really competitive, and really, really, really strong. Speaking on the realms of basketball, women's basketball, there were some other games that I thought really intrigued me as well. And then later on in the broadcast, we're actually going to talk about the Division II, Division III schools. LSU completely, I saw bits and pieces of this game yesterday. It really wasn't much, but they literally blew out Queens, North Carolina. But probably one of the biggest games that I actually watched partially of and listened to on the radio. And being from Indiana, being from Bloomington, this Hoosiers team not shockingly defeated Eastern Illinois 96-43 in what was an absolute blowout. I didn't even see any highlights from the game because we all knew it would be a blowout. We all knew that Mackenzie Holmes would be up at the rim. But talk about the little players like Lanita. Just talk about them for a minute. They were terrific last night. And you put those little post players, the girls that are on the bench, then they played impressive. This lead would have gone up even higher if it wasn't for them. And it was just amazing. It's just amazing to see that win, not really amazing. It didn't even shock me, but Indiana's going to be that team this year. Just see it now because Indiana's next opponent's going to probably be one of the hardest, and they're playing on Sunday as well, like Indiana playing against Army. Indiana's going to play against number 15, Stanford, on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So, which would mean that's like 1 to 2 p.m. Central. And then they got a hard schedule again with Murray State, Lipscomb, and Tennessee. Now, Murray State's going to be a hard team because I think they went to the tournament last year. But the three hardest opponents on this list for the first 2 weeks are Stanford, Tennessee, and Princeton. Princeton, I was not there, and that could have been the one game I actually did go to. That was 100% free, and I didn't even know it because that game, the second round of the NCAA tournament, was one of, if not the best games that I have watched in women's basketball. But another good game last year was Miami and Indiana, but that's for another day. But I'm just saying, Indiana, to me, they're not going to win the national championship in women's basketball. I don't see that happening. I do not see that even coming for us. But if they do, I think we'll be a powerhouse. We'll be a big powerhouse school. And I just think Indiana is always been on the right track, but this is the last season that I think they're going to actually be really, really good. And I hate to say that, but there are so many other great teams in women's college basketball. Iowa, to me, is going to win the Big Ten for the third consecutive year unless something happens. Ohio State will meet them in the title. But some other games that went on last night that really were not that exciting. As I said, LSU played Queens, North Carolina, beat them 112-55. Utah beat the crap out of South Carolina State, 108-48. And another good game last night that went into overtime that could have actually been a major upset. Gonzaga almost upset Washington State. And as of that game, the big score for Gonzaga was Kalini Trong, who scored 22-16. And for Washington State, Charsley Leaguer Walker had 26-6-4. So that does it for talking about women's college basketball. And then I wanted to also bring up that tonight we have some matchups as well. South Dakota is going to play Creighton at 12:30 today, which is actually going to be around the time this episode airs and is actually on Spotify for podcasters, or Anchor, or whatever they call it now. Mississippi State will play against Southern Louisiana, and they'll play them at 7:30 tonight. And then a big matchup that could be upset-proof. USC is playing against Florida Gulf Coast. Tomorrow, we have Illinois Marquette, and that's going to be at 3 p.m. in the women's games. And then on Sunday, we have Ohio State meeting IUPUI at 1 p.m., Maryland and South Carolina. That one's going to be a good game. I think South Carolina, to me, they are not national championship proof. They're out with Aaliyah. They have Aaliyah Boston out. No other players on there, to me, are actually going to be good enough compared to Aaliyah Boston and that team last year. But if you want to see them make an Elite Eight run, that's kind of what I see them making this year as well. I think that's going to be a possibility. And these, again, are ranked matchups in the NCAA Division I. Notre Dame will play NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, at 2 p.m. Liberty will play against Texas at 3 p.m. Iowa plays Northern Iowa in what is a regional matchup, a rivalry at 3 p.m. UConn plays NC State. UConn's the real deal. Paige Beckers is back. They got one of the best forwards in the country. They have the best defense in the country. They legitimately, if they could make a run to the national title, they will, and they probably will succeed. Because that's how good this team is. And the big piece that I mentioned at the very beginning to the pie is the whipped cream of Paige Beckers. She is incredible. And her coming back from injury, her fighting back from illness, and actually coming back to be possibly number 2 in the WNBA draft behind Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark's number 1. She's number 2. And I would say Cameron Brink is number 3. Because that's just how things are going to roll when it ever comes down to this season. This Stanford game, too, I'm going to be it's going to be a hard-fought matchup. I think Stanford and Indiana have the opportunity to actually make that a very defensive-oriented ball game and very not high-scoring. Cameron Brick could actually expect to see an Indiana upset, maybe. Or see Stanford win, and the upset for Indiana would actually continue. This, like I said, Indiana could literally be ranked 25th in the country because of their schedule. And that's what I was trying to say earlier. It seems like Jacksonville State's going to play against Mississippi State. I had to recognize that because I did one of their volleyball games last year. Mississippi Valley plays LSU at 3 p.m. DePaul plays Louisville, and then I just mentioned the Indiana-Stanford game. Bellarmine plays UCLA. Idaho State plays Washington State. And wrapping up the night, you got Davidson against number 16 North Carolina. Now, I have to admit, there is a girl, I forget her name, but she plays on North Carolina, and she played at Iowa State. And she's got to be a perennial three-point shooter. I think she actually was ranked as one of the newcomers of the year in the NCAA. And I think, yeah, North Carolina, they could even make a run for the Elite Eight or the Final Four this year. And then the upset-proof Colorado Buffaloes, who just upset the LSU Tigers in Week 1 in Las Vegas, no less, will viva their way past Oklahoma State, I think. And then on Monday, to wrap up, to start the week, and then to start the middle of the week, Memphis will play Tennessee, and USC will play Lemoyne College of DeWitt, New York. That does it for all the matchups that are actually going to be going on from today through Monday. Coming up next, we'll be talking about the Indiana men's, and we just talked about the Indiana women's, but the Indiana men's basketball team and some Division II, Division III men's and women's basketball action, including, actually, we'll talk about men's, and then we'll also talk about James Madison. But after that, then we'll talk about Division II and Division III women's basketball. And my hopefuls for those chances, because I already brought up Division II and Division III basketball. And then next week, in our last episode, and then next week I should be having a guest. So I'm just going to leave this now for the taking, and we will be right back. So coming up, just to clarify things, we will be talking about the Indiana men's basketball team, and then we will talk about Division II and III women's basketball and go through some games. All right, we'll be right back after this, guys. And we'll be right back with another edition of the Cinderella Slippers Podcast. Please make sure to actually follow us on LinkedIn. We have a newsletter that comes out every so often with our next article coming out this Friday night, going into Saturday morning. So be on the lookout for that. Follow us on social media at Lents Braydyn, LentsBraydyn on Twitter X or Twitter or whatever they call it now. Follow us again on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube at BRAYDYN 98.5 FM WBRA on YouTube, which those episodes will actually be coming out on there in the next few weeks. We thank you so much for listening to the show, and we'll be right back after this.
Sarà perché ti amo, un'emozione che cresce piano piano, stringimi forte, stammi più vicino, se ci sto bene, sarà perché ti amo.